If retinol isn't yellow, it's not pure. I was told this from a professional.
A professional zookeeper? That video shocked me because I thought it was literally a parody. No hate to that creator, but that is the weirdest piece of misinformation I've probably ever come across in my life. I was going on a tangent about how
I never buy
what she said about retinol being yellow and that's the only way you can trust it is just such BS.
If your friend jumped off a cliff, would you follow along? We have all probably heard that question growing up. I know I did. But with TikTok, it kind of makes you wonder. If your entire feed is doing it, would you follow along? If your For You page is flooded with one opinion, does it make you question your own? If everyone is suddenly hating on a celebrity, do you feel like you should jump on the bandwagon? TikTok is a great example of the herd mentality. Trends spread like wildfire, the same memes circulate endlessly, and everyone starts sounding the same. But how does this happen? Why does this happen? And are we also a sheep in the herd? To truly understand herd mentality or herding, it is crucial to also dive into crowd psychology. This area of study focuses on how individuals change when they are in a group setting. It helps explain why one would do something in a crowd that they wouldn't do alone, and how that can lead to collective action, whether irrational or rational. Herding or herd mentality is really just one piece of the puzzle. The Crowd, a study of the popular mind by Gustave Le Bon, is one of the most well-known and influential books on crowd psychology. It pretty much laid the groundwork for much of modern understanding of mass behavior. Before The Crowd, much of the study of psychology was mainly focused on individuals. Le Bon's work was groundbreaking because he shifted the focus to group behavior. He suggested something that nobody else had ever brought forward. People could lose their rationality when part of a crowd. His ideas have been extensively cited by later social psychologists such as
Sigmund Freud.
And this even caught the attention of political leaders and dictators. A particular one has even said that he studied and applied Le Bon's work to his rallies and protests. On the ruins of so many ideas formerly considered beyond discussion and today decayed and decaying, of so many sources of authority that successive revolutions have destroyed, this power which alone has arisen in their stead seems soon destined to absorb the others. While all of our ancient beliefs are tottering and disappearing, while the old pillars of society are given away one by one, the power of crowd is the only force that nothing menaces. The age we are about to enter will in truth be the era of crowds. Now, for some context, I don't know much about history, much less about French history, but from what I could gather, is that this book was written a decade or so later after the French Revolution. The French Revolution was one of the very first major events where a large group of people, the common people, the workers, and the peasants, all rose together to fundamentally challenge the power structures that have held them and controlled them for so long. So when Le Bon was talking about the decay of the authorities and the rise of the crowd, he was essentially saying that as these old powers and beliefs fade away, the collective, the power of all these common people working together was now the new force. The crowd, according to him, was the only force that remained and would continue to grow. And this, he believes, marks the beginning of a new era. The era of the crowds. And he couldn't be more correct. It's crazy how we're seeing and living what Le Bon described in action. This specific paragraph of the book best encapsulates what we're going through now, especially with the creation of the internet. Cancel culture, social media, viral trends, these are all such great examples of this. Just like in Le Bon's time, where the power of crowds could influence revolutions and societal shifts, today's online mobs can shape public perception, destroy reputations, and create global movements almost instantly. What's happening today with the internet is really just a continuation of what Gustave Le Bon observed about the crowds in the 19th century, just on a much more faster and global scale. In everyday terms, crowd refers to a group of people, just a group of individuals that happen to be together. However, in psychology, the term crowd is used in a very different manner. Under certain given circumstances, and only under those circumstances, an agglomeration of men presents new characteristics very different from those of the individuals composing it. The sentiments and ideas of all the peoples in the gatherings take one and the same direction, and their conscious personality vanishes. It forms a single being and is subjected to the law of the mental unity of crowds. He refers to this as the psychological crowd, and his notion of the law of mental unity of crowds is basically suggesting that they all have just one consciousness together, right? It doesn't really mean that they all have to literally have the same consciousness, but they act like it. They have their own collective fears and desires. Any action or decision they take is never based off personal interest. It's always based off the crowd. Crowd is a collection of individual people. And keyword individual. These people there have their own mindsets, personalities, beliefs. However, a crowd is just one single being. This might also be why Gustave Le Bon refers to the crowd as it instead of they. But what are these characteristics? What are these specific characteristics that a crowd has? Le Bon stresses that crowds are never guided by conscious, deliberate thought. They are always guided by the unconscious, the impulses. When studying the fundamental characteristics of a crowd, we stated that it is guided almost exclusively by unconscious motives. Its acts are far more under the influence of the spinal cord than of the brain. This suggests that crowds operate on a very basic primal level, reacting to immediate stimuli and responding to their emotional impulses rather than reflecting on rational thought. This is actually the second characteristic. Crowds are impulsive. One of the most notable features, according to Le Bon, is that crowds are inherently impulsive. So they do not think or plan out their actions, they just respond. Any display of premeditation by crowds is in consequence out of the question. They may be animated in succession by the most contrary sentiments, but they will always be under the influence of the exciting causes of the moment. They are like the leaves which a tempest whirls up and scatters in every direction and then allows to fall. In a crowd, decisions and actions are often made based of contagion, which is the spread of emotions and behaviors in a crowd, and suggestibility. So for example, if somebody in the crowd decides to start throwing a tomato, everyone else in the crowd is likely to do the same because one person in the crowd did it. Crowds feel an irresistible power, aka a sense of collective strength. When you're part of a crowd, you are also anonymous, which also means that you feel a large sense of power because your decisions are not made just by you, it's the entire crowd. So this sense of power can lead individuals to do things they would otherwise not do by themselves. Gustave Le Bon describes this transformation by saying, "A crowd is not merely impulsive and mobile. Like a savage, it is not prepared to admit that anything can come between its desire and the realization of its desire. The crowd's collective size and momentum is what makes them act on their impulses. There is no fear of consequences, no fear of guilt." Crowds suppress individual observation and critical thinking. According to Le Bon, from the moment that they form part of a crowd, the learned man and the ignoramus are equally incapable of observation. This very fact that crowds possess uncommon ordinary qualities explains why they can never accomplish acts demanding a high degree of intelligence. Decisions affecting matters of general interest made by an assembly of distinguished men who specialize in different fields are not noticeably superior to decisions that might be adopted by a gathering of imbeciles. The truth is, such assemblies can only bring to bear on the task at hand the mediocre qualities that are the birthright of every average individual. In crowds, it is not stupidity, but ingenuity that is accumulated. It is not true, as it is often repeated, that all the world has more wits than Voltaire. In reality, Voltaire assuredly has more wits than all the world, if by all the world we mean crowds. By the way, Voltaire was a French philosopher, writer, and the leading figure of the Enlightenment. This quote, "all the world has more wit than Voltaire," is actually from his own book, Candide, where he mocks several types of ideas that are popular at the moment, such as blind optimism, societal norms, and himself. This, from what I could gather, is often understood in France as a satirical and ironic remark. Hopefully that gives some context. In other words, even if the individual involved in the crowd is intelligent in isolation, when part of a crowd, they act in ways that might be intellectually inferior to what they would have done alone. However, Le Bon also acknowledges that while crowds can be intellectually inferior, they can also be morally superior, which means that they can show actions of great passion and bravery, even if their actions seem extreme or irrational. Taking all of this into account, please don't take anything I said, or to be precise, Gustave Le Bon said, to the dot. This book was written centuries ago, and there have been modern scientists and psychologists that have made books and papers disagreeing with what he has said. Wisdom of Crowds by James Surowiecki is one example. I really wanted to dive into this book and share this other perspective, but I couldn't because the script was getting far too long, and then the video would get far too long, and I wouldn't be able to get this video out before 2025. I haven't read the book, but from what I could gather from the segments and also from another book, The Psychology of the Masses, which I will talk about in a bit, it seems that James uses the term crowd in more of an everyday term compared to the psychological crowd. He refers to the crowd as a group of individuals, and if you if you paid attention to the start of my video, you would know that this is not the meaning that most psychologists are working with here, and this is not the meaning that Gustave Le Bon is referring to. Nonetheless, James Surowiecki makes very valid points. He argues that a group of experienced individuals would come to a much more better conclusion compared to just one experienced individual. However, keep in mind that this is not the definition of crowd that most psychologists are working with. I'd say that James' definition is more of like a community. A crowd is impulsive, they're erratic, and they can never plan anything together. They just move together, right? These are the key characteristics of a crowd that Gustave Le Bon mentioned. Also, I mentioned The Psychology of the Masses earlier. This book is by Noah Heiberg, and it's such a good book. If you want a complete overview of crowd psychology, what different psychologists have said about it, read this book. Even if you're not interested in crowd psychology, if you're interested in human nature, how humans work, this is a really good book. Really great book. I strongly recommend it. And I actually wanted to make a segment dedicated to this book in this video, but I couldn't. I might make a second part just to talk about that book because it's so good. I made so many notes. Now, I say this at the end of my video, but I'll say it again here for the sake of clarity. I'm not trying to argue that you should be a lone wolf or you should be alone and not join any community because Gustave Le Bon said it makes you, quote, intellectually inferior. And in fact, I don't think that is the point he was trying to make either. It's not the definition we're using here. A community and a crowd in this context is very different from how you might use it in everyday terms. 2, if you come to this conclusion, you miss the point of my entire video. On to the herd mentality. The herd mentality, also known as groupthink or crowd mentality or herding, is a psychological phenomenon that refers to the tendency of individuals to align their beliefs, behaviors, and actions with those of a larger group, often without independent thought or critical analysis. It is often symbolized by a herd of sheep. because sheep are known to always be instinctively together and move together, even if that means walking into danger. Take for example, in 2005, there was a tragic incident in Turkey where a single sheep wandered off a cliff and nearly 1,500 others followed, resulting in the death of approximately 450 sheep. The remaining sheep only survived because they landed on the bodies of those who had fallen earlier. If a sheep does something, whether it is moving to a specific direction or jumping over an obstacle, the rest of the sheep will follow. This can also be explained by the herd instinct. The herd instinct refers to an innate biological drive to follow the behavior of others for survival or social reasons. It is more of a primal instinctive urge present in many animals, including humans. Take for example, the sheep that I mentioned earlier. However, the herd mentality has more to do with a crowd following a specific trend or opinion. This is more of a psychological, social tendency rather than a biological one. Now that we have clarified what a herd mentality is, how and why does this happen? If you search for the answer line, you'll come across a variety of answers. But I have decided to stick to just one study because I find that this best encapsulates everything else. The research paper is titled "The Concept of Herd Behavior, Its Psychological and Neural Pinnings," and it identifies 3 key mechanisms driving this behavior. I'll leave the full study in the description. Number 1, emotional contagion, facial mimicry, and mirror neurons. I mentioned contagion earlier, and this is basically the same idea. Emotions that are and behaviors that are spread between a group. It refers to how when one person expresses an emotion, whether it is anger, fear, joy, others are likely to pick it up. They do this unconsciously. For example, psychotherapists might find themselves feeling depressed after a session with a depressed client. Now, facial mimicry is kind of the same, but this is more mimicking the facial expressions. And once again, this is done unconsciously. It's actually something that we might catch ourselves doing on our everyday situations without knowing. For example, you're walking down the street and the person in front of you smiles and waves at you. You might smile back instinctively. It's just an unconscious behavior. Now, another example is if someone looks angry, you might unconsciously start mirroring their facial expression without knowing. Actually, I think that happens often whenever 2 people are arguing. You can see that when the first one starts to show anger, the second one also tends to do the same with their face. And lastly, mirror neurons. And this is more of a recent finding in brain science. In the late 1980s, when a group of scientists were recording electrical activity in the brain of an amacat, these researchers found neurons that fire both when the animal acted and when the animal observed the same action performed by another. Although it remains controversial, some recent data suggests that a similar mirror neuron system may exist in human brains as well. All of these mechanisms show that humans may be wired to instinctively mirror other people. In fact, in a lot of YouTube dark psychology videos or how to improve your social skills, they usually advise you to mirror others consciously. Whether it's mirroring their tone, mirroring their voice, mirroring their facial expression, their gestures, it has been shown time and time again that by doing this, the person you're talking to is gonna be unconsciously more willing to be open to you. Compared to the prior one, this one is far much more conscious and deliberate. There is a very famous study done by Solomon Ash where a participant was shown a card with a single line and another card with 3 lines of varying length. Their task was to match the line on the first card to a correct line of identical length on the second card. Each participant was placed in a group with several actors who were instructed to give incorrect answers or some trails. On the groups with the actors, the real participant conformed to the group's incorrect response 37% of the time, even though the correct answer was obvious. 75% of participants conformed at least once, while 25% never conformed. Musfer Sherrick did a similar study but with an optical illusion, and he demonstrated that individual perception of the illusion converged on a shared social reality. The research states that this is because the human mind is more receptive to social norms, and in other words, that our brains are more likely to put other suggestions as a major basis of choice. Unlike other living beings, humans are unique because we are the ones that have social norms and mutually shared expectations. Personally, I don't entirely agree with this point because if we grow up in an environment where there are social norms, where they tell us to be receptive of others or to put others' ideas or opinions above our own, yes, we might turn out that way. But it doesn't mean that our human brains are inherently more receptive to others' ideas, I think. I think that has a lot more to do with nurturing and the way society has been built. But that's just my 2 cents, right? I'm not the scientist. They are the researchers. They are the scientists. Okay, I'm just a girl with my 2 cents. Rational conformity and information cascades. Sometimes it can be the rational choice to conform with the majority even if you would do something differently individually. Take for example, a rumor about a bank reaching bankruptcy can be a self-fulfilling prophecy. Information cascades are also an extension of this idea. They happen when a group of people decide what to do based on what the person in front of them or what others have done, right? So this is the belief that the other person might know something that you don't. So to illustrate this, going back to example of the bank, if a group withdraws money from a bank due to a rumor it might fail, others who see this might assume the bank really is in trouble, even if their own judgment tells them otherwise. They follow the crowd because it seems safer. The more people join in, the stronger the belief becomes, and soon everyone is withdrawing their money, causing the bank to actually collapse. One person's decision influenced the next and the next and the next because they're all following based off this pattern, even if the initial person who made the decision was incorrect. This is basically an information cascade. It's like a domino or a waterfall. It builds momentum the more people join in. Does that remind you of something? Oh, TikTok. In a New York Times article titled How TikTok Reads Your Mind, Ben Smith reveals an internal TikTok document that sheds light on how the app's algorithm works. The document, headed TikTok Algo 101, was produced by TikTok's engineering team in Beijing. A company spokeswoman, Hilary McQuaid, confirmed its authenticity and said it was written to explain to non-technical employees how the algorithm works. It also details how the app keeps users hooked by optimizing for metrics such as retention and time spent. Their ultimate goal is to add more and more daily active users. The longer you spend on their app, the more they earn. Ben Smith follows by saying, and for many users who consume without creating, the app is shockingly good at reading your preferences and steering you to one of its many sides. Whether you're interested in socialism or Excel tips or sex, conservative politics, or a specific celebrity, is astonishingly good at revealing people's desire even to themselves. The TikTok algorithm knew my sexuality better than I did, reads one in a series of headlines about people marveling at the app's X-ray on their inner lives. This is achieved by analyzing engagement factors such as likes, comments, and playtime, which influence what videos appear on a user's feed. In the article, TikTok doesn't read your mind, it makes your mind. By Tierna Gray, the author argues against the New York Times article. Basically, Ray's argument is that TikTok isn't about reading our mind, but rather about influencing the collective behavior. Because it constantly prioritizes popular content that has proven to be liked before, this means that it can create a certain type of thinking just by constantly repeating the same content. Whether or not you agree with his argument, there's no denying the role that TikTok plays in collective behavior. For instance, if a user consistently engages with a video that supports one particular political stance, then it is likely that the algorithm will keep showing them more of the same video, which will keep reinforcing the same ideas they have. Just that, but when users are repeatedly exposed to the same ideas and beliefs, they may start to adapt those because it seems the most popular and accepted one. I'm pretty sure the first example people think of when they think of TikTok and her mentality is viral trends. I mean, TikTok thrives on this. Millions of dances are replicated every single day. Millions of memes, the same ideas are circulated endlessly. And you know, this sort of creates this ripple effect throughout the entire app and then towards other social media apps. At its core, the herd mentality stems from our innate desire to belong to a group. Seeing others succeed with a particular dance, trend, video, others might replicate it because if I do this, maybe I'll get the same attention, approval, or success. For example, dance trends, from Renegade to the Wednesday Addams dance, these trends often originate from a single creator or influencer and quickly spread as millions replicate the move. Also, this one dance trend that was popular about a week ago, which was a Sophia Richie dance trend, and it feels weird to call this a dance trend because you know, although everyone at first was raging over it, was like, oh my god, look at these dance moves, and they were like replicating it. If you go to the original video of Sophia Richie dancing, you can see that she's just vibing. This is not a choreography that she thought of beforehand. She's really just vibing. You see like thousands of other people trying to replicate the same movements. Right? She's like, I think she points to the camera at one point, but that's not because it is part of a choreography. It's because she's just vibing, and that's what felt natural at the moment. And then there's like a bunch of other people that are copying the exact same movements of her walking backwards and then pointing towards the camera. Which I honestly, you know, I can partly understand this because maybe there's this belief that copying the same dance trend, you know, it kind of makes you associated with Sophia Richie. And that's the thing with a lot of influencers, is because people kind of want to be like them. This is why they want to buy what they buy. At its best, the herd mentality can provide sort of this creative stagnation, where the same ideas keep being repeated and recycled endlessly. At its worst is when the herd mentality promotes dangerous behavior. The Benadryl challenge is an example of a very dangerous trend that went viral on TikTok around 2 years ago. This trend required participants to consume large amounts of Benadryl to experience hallucination. This challenge tragically led to several deaths. They were so young, and I'm 100% certain that they weren't aware of the dangers of consuming too much Benadryl. I mean, since everyone in their feed was doing it, it must be fine, right? The herd mentality and the algorithm constantly favoring shock value definitely played a huge part in this. But also, I believe that the platform has a responsibility to ensure that nobody is endorsing harmful and dangerous acts on their videos. Just that, but the parents, educators, the adults involved in young children's life, right? Let them be aware of all the potential dangers that could happen if you just follow random trends on the internet. Now, it is also important to note that there is another side of the coin, right, with anything. Participating in viral trends can be a great creative opportunity, especially for smaller creators. It turns into a great chance for them to gain exposure. Take, for example, the Draw This in Your Style challenge that is popular on both TikTok and Instagram. This is where artists come together and draw something, but in their own style. They can showcase their creative skills and gain exposure through the trend. Of course, not all of these things are bad. FOMO is part of human nature, whether you have social media or not. What's important is to not let it control you. Engaging in trends can be fun, creative, and even inspiring, as long as it's done intentionally and not out of compulsion. Plus, the nature of short-form content can make it difficult for people to actually break down and give detailed information on a topic. This can lead to oversimplification of a specific topic, which can lead to a lack of critical thinking because the users were not shown a deep dive of the topic for them to come to their own conclusion. If this was a TikTok, I would not have been able to lay all the notes, all the books that I've read. I would have not been able to share the different perspectives. Having everything said, when people on TikTok lack critical thinking skills. 2, you should not be part of a community or have friends because, quote, it makes you intellectually inferior. 3. You are intellectually superior compared to people who use TikTok. 4. Only dumb people participate in trends. 5. TikTok is a special case and no other social media have these type of behaviors, and this video is clearly dissing TikTok and not using it as an example. If you watch till the end of this video and you come to any of these conclusions, then you lack critical thinking skills. Like Gustave Le Bon said, your acts are far more under the influence of the spinal cord than of the brain. I know that he is calling them impulsive and not calling them stupid, but I think it's still a really good insult. TikTok is really just an example here. The herd mentality is available and seen in every single social media app, and it will be the same way as long as there are people interacting on those apps. The herd mentality is not something that exists or is only observed in social media. This is part of human nature. Even if social media decided to stop working today, it would still very much be prevalent. But of course, social media now amplifies this on a more global, faster scale. In the end, TikTok is not inherently good or bad. It's just a reflection of how we as humans behave when placed in a digital ecosystem designed for connection, validation, and attention. Whether it's participating in a viral trend, creating content for others, or simply consuming what's on your feed, the question isn't whether or not TikTok or the internet influences you, because it does. Rather, the question is, do you know that it does, and do you understand how it does? What are you engaging with? Did you decide that, or did the algorithm decide that for you? Take this video, for example. Are you watching this? Are you watching this video or content like this out of curiosity, out of genuine interest? Or are you simply following the herd? I wanted to end this video off with a little, before 2025, because I hope to get this out before 2025. If not, that will be very embarrassing. Because I said to all my friends, yes, I'll get this out before 2025. But really, it was such a great year. Really a great year, honestly. And I'm really happy that I got to share this year with you guys and grow my YouTube channel. We have been through some ups and downs, a lot of ups and downs. And I just really wanted to say that I'm just really grateful for anyone who watches my video. And I've gotten so many lovely comments throughout the year. Honestly, I appreciate that. I would say this in every video, but I cannot because then I will overwhelm people and they'll get bored if they keep hearing the same thing over and over again. Really excited for 2025. For this channel, I have some ideas. I have so many ideas I want to do and execute. It's really about time. But I'm also building something on the side. It's not related to my YouTube at all, although some of you guys that know what I'm building, you might come from there and stumble across my YouTube. I'm really excited for this. I'm really excited for what I'm building. If there's any type of videos that you guys would love to see on my channel, then feel free to comment it. That's it. I hope to see you guys on the next one, and I hope you all have a really lovely year. Thank you all so much.